Going in, I didn't know what to expect with Get Out. It was written and directed by Jordan Peele of Key & Peele, who are primarily known for their comedy stuff. And after seeing the trailer, it kind of looked like it could go either way. It looked like it was going to be a bit of a dark comedy, or possibly just a straight-up horror film. And what it ended up being was a horror satire. Although I'd have to say it's probably about 20% horror and 80% satire. It's about this couple, Rose and Chris, and Rose is taking Chris home to meet her family for the first time, but they don't know that he's black. When they get there, things seem okay at first. Everybody's really nice to Chris. Then, as time goes on, things start to get weirder and weirder, and finally they realize that maybe it's a good idea to get out. What I liked about it was that I thought it was a very unique perspective for a horror film. We really don't get that many black-fronted horror films, with the exception of the occasional Tales from the Hood, or that Snoop Dogg horror film from a while back, Mr. Bones, I think it was. So this was interesting, because they were taking the perspective of this black kid who's going into this all-white suburban neighborhood, and he's feeling really out of place, and you don't know if a lot of this is in his head, or if there's something else going on, if there's some sort of racial thing, or if it's something else entirely. I liked the cast. I thought the guy that played Chris was really good. And the father who played Dean was Bradley Whitford, who was totally channeling Michael Gross from Family Ties. It's all I could think of the whole movie. I'm like, Michael Gross is looking pretty good these days. And then I find out, oh, it's because it's not him at all. There were a few really big laughs in the film, which I was happy with, because knowing Key & Peele, I was expecting there to be at least a little bit of humor to it. And it started off without a lot of comedy. So when they finally did have a few humorous moments, I was happy. And I'm not one who really likes to go into horror films where they just have unnecessary comedic relief. But with this, it did feel like there were a few opportunities, and thankfully they did play upon them well. And they didn't abuse them. They didn't use them at improper times. It didn't diffuse the tension. It was there when it needed to be there, and then they went back to some of the more horrific things at play. What I didn't like about it was that I felt it took way too long to get going. They introduced the characters, and it took a little while to kind of get that off the ground, and then they go to visit her parents, and that really drags on for a while, and we know where things are headed. It's just they're dragging their feet about getting there. But once they finally did get there, I thought it played out better, and it started to become more interesting, because in the beginning, I was watching it, but I was kind of tuning out a little bit. I wasn't quite feeling it, and it wasn't until things started to get weird in the suburbs that it really engaged me, and then I was on board. But I'd say about the first 30-40 minutes, I was kind of just not feeling it. After the first half hour or so, Get Out is a very good horror satire. I don't want to get into talking about the satirical nature of it, because I think that really will ruin your experience, and I don't want to spoil that for anybody. I'll just say that the third act, when you finally do find out exactly what's going on, it's kind of what you think, but then not exactly what you think. It was headed in one direction, and I'm like, okay, that's all right. I mean, it's nothing that hasn't been done before, but then when they explain it a little bit further and you see what they're doing, it's like, oh, okay, I get it. That's actually kind of clever. Get Out's a lot of fun. There's not a lot of humor, but the humor in there is very well played. The scares are relatively infrequent, although there were a couple of people in the theater that were screaming because of some of the horror aspects. There was a couple of jump scares, but it didn't go into heavy-duty Bagul territory, and the satire was on point. I really enjoyed that. If you like Key & Peele and you're looking for a horror movie that is not your typical horror movie, it's definitely worth a look.